But
Okay.
I'm going to go ahead and get started.
Okay, yeah.
So if you're ready, I'm Steve Grubbs, and I am the founder and CEO of Victory XR. And Victory XR is the company that built what you see here. And so one of the things that I want you to know is that we are in a new age. If you think about what we are doing right now, you know, is this a perfect environment? No. Is it a far advance over what we've had before? Yes. There are a couple of things that are happening in the world that are going to affect you for the rest of your lives. Number one, decentralization is real, meaning for the last 1,000 years, humans and civilization have gravitated towards cities. But that no longer is the case. Because of new technologies, we now have the ability to live wherever we want, and for the most part, work the jobs that we had before. So that's macro, big change number one. Big change number two is AI. And I'm sure everybody in here is familiar with AI, and if you're not using it in some of your assignments, you know, you probably should be, to whatever extent you can do that legally. But here's what's, for most of my life, what we've seen is humans being replaced by machines. And we're going to continue to see that. But what you will see in your life is humans replaced by computer thought. And that doesn't mean there's going to be fewer jobs. But what it does mean is that you, in what you do, are going to have to be able to, you have to know how to learn. You have to know how to learn on your own, because most of your life, you have had learning delivered to you in an organized fashion. And that's not going to be suitable. It's not going to be enough in the future. There are always going to be ways to be productive and be successful. But in order to remain relevant with changing technology and changing times, you're going to have to be able to learn quickly and learn on your own. So those are two big changes that I want you to know, because no generation in the history of humankind has faced this sort of challenge. I mean, you know, there have been other major challenges. Not that long ago, the challenge was just, will you have enough food to survive? Well, that's finished. And will you have housing? Will you have clothing? Those issues are behind us now. But today, we now enter an era where humanity will be in a competition with AI. And I think that's a perfect segue to talk about the program that you are in. As you may guess, I travel a lot. I am a frequent flyer. I travel all over the world. And I've learned a few differentiators between good and great. So I don't know if you may or may not take notes. Maybe you just want to remember these. But let's talk about the first differentiator between good and great. When you address somebody, Isabella, Kurt, Riley, Matthew, when you address somebody and you use their first name, it's the single most powerful thing that you can do at the beginning of a relationship. I have 4 companies, and in all of the companies, I teach them exactly the same thing. When you're talking to a potential customer, when you're talking to a client, at least once in the conversation, maybe more, but don't be weird about it, use their first name. And the reason is because it immediately tears down that wall of corporate division between you and whoever that person is. If I say, you know, Amanda, it's great to have you here today. I appreciate you coming to listen to me. That's far different than me just saying it without addressing you by name. So Number one, and you can see when I travel like to a Four Seasons hotel or, you know, a JW Marriott, the level of training with their people is extraordinary. Or even at a level of like Chick-fil-A. What is it, Nick? What is it that if you say something like, oh, I appreciate you doing that for me, or I appreciate you getting me those fries, what is it that the people at Chick-fil-A always say to you? There's two words.
Mute myself. There we go.
Okay, you're on.
They always say my pleasure.
Exactly. My pleasure. When you go to McDonald's, what do they say? They don't say my pleasure. They say, oh yeah, no problem, or something like that. It's not trained into them like the way it is at Chick-fil-A. Every single element of the Chick-fil-A experience is near perfect. And it's just a level of customer interaction that they get. So those little things. So that's number two. First, the name. Second, the small pleasantries that people are trained to say. There are right things to say and there are wrong things to say. But most of what people say is sort of in the middle. Number three, and I know a lot of this is obvious, but it doesn't hurt to be reminded of these things. Number three, if you really want to be successful at a higher level, sweat the details. What does that mean, sweat the details? That's probably a term nobody in your generation even uses. I think Eric probably knows what I mean here, maybe Keon. Sweat the details just simply means that the little things really matter. And so, for example, when I go to a hotel, I'm not overly freaked out about bed bugs, but after reading these stories about Paris the last few weeks, I'm a lot more aware of it. And so the first thing I do when I get into a hotel room is I pull back the main sheet from the bed and I look at the sheet that's underneath it. And occasionally I find that the housekeeping did not change that lower sheet. They left it because nobody's going to see it. And so, you know, that doesn't happen very often, maybe once a year. But that's a big detail. But a small detail with those sheets is when you look at them in the nice hotels, the sheets are smooth and they look good. I don't stay in like crappy hotels, but I stay in medium hotels. And sometimes in the medium hotels, that sheet is just all wrinkled and, looks like it was just all stuffed in some basket that they carried in. And do I really care about that? Not really. But it's a small detail that tells you they care enough about what I'm doing. Now, I'm going to tell you a little bit else about my background. I'm not going to talk the whole time either. But in my previous life, I was a politician. I was elected to the Iowa legislature at age 24, served 6 years, and 4 of those years were as chair of the House Education Committee. And if you want to learn about customer service, run for public office, because you think that there's high demand on the servers at Texas Roadhouse. Try being a state legislator, picking up the phone and people are not happy that their child support is not being paid. And so there are a few lessons that I learned that I felt really mattered, and I think probably will apply here as well. When I was first running, I went to this organization. I was trying to raise money from them, pay for my campaign. And I went to them and I sat down and I began talking. And I talked because what I believed was that in order to convince them to support me, I needed to convince them with my words. I needed to persuade them. It made sense to me. If I want you to vote for me, I better persuade you to vote for me. The guy stopped me after a while and he said, you know what? Here's lesson number one. you win more votes listening than you do talking. And that was a revelation to me. And I really had trouble believing it. But I started trying it. You know, when I was trying to earn a vote, instead of me telling them what I believed, I started asking them what they believed. Now, if they asked me a question, I was straightforward. But what I found was that most voters really wanted somebody to listen to their thoughts, listen to what they were thinking. And so I was shocked. There were people who should not have been supporting me, but they did support me because I listened. They never even asked me what I believed. They just wanted me to listen. So that was rule number one that I learned. Here's rule number two. And this is a pretty important rule in hospitality, but this is from politics. You will find people in your life who are angry. They may or may not be angry at you, but they're angry at your company. They're angry at your product. They're angry at your service, whatever the case might be. And in politics, there are just a lot of angry people. You know, I never quite realized when I was in high school, I was young. Everybody's nice to you when you're a kid, when you're a student. And then you become an adult and you find people are willing to be mean to you. And especially, you know, I was a pretty young state legislator, but and most people were nice, but people would be mean. And they'd tell me why they just thought I was horrible. And I listened and did that whole thing. But here's what I learned. Many of those people, after they told me how much they disliked whatever it was, I ended up staying in touch with them, if that was an option. I didn't say, okay, this is my enemy. I'm building a wall between us. Instead, I stayed in touch with them. I kept talking to them. If I saw something that was relevant, I would respond to them. And that's a fairly small group of people. So if you think about the bell curve of customers at a hotel or a hospitality group or a restaurant or anything, a business, there's a bell curve, right? Raise your hand if you know what a bell curve is. Okay, at least half have had stats class. If you don't know what the bell curve is, you'll learn about it in stats class. If you haven't taken a stats class, I would strongly encourage you to take one. It applies throughout all life. But essentially, the bell curve says that 2/3 of the people are normal. And in any way that you compare them, 2/3 of the people are normal. And then to the right side over here, we have the second standard deviation, which is, I don't know, a small number like 2.3%. And then the third standard deviation, which I think is less than 1%. One of you might be able to correct me on that. And then you have the same thing on the other side. So let's say that we're talking about customers on this bell curve. 2/3 are just going to be your average customer, and they are going to, they're going to interact normally. They're not going to be a problem. They're going to come and go, and you're barely going to see them or hear them or even think about them when they're gone. That's most of your customers. But on this side of the bell curve, you're going to have, this is the angry side, this is the happy side. So the second standard deviation on this side are people are going to be very angry. They're going to want to speak to the manager. And you'll find in life, because I look at it with my customer data, 2%, some 2 to 3%, pretty accurate. So you're going to have the angry people over here. And then in the third standard deviation, you're going to have either A, the nutcases, or B, the people who feel so wrong that they are going to file a lawsuit. So the third standard deviation is very, very difficult. But that second standard deviation, those that are angry, it's a small number of people, and you want to stay in touch with them. You can win those people back, but you got to give it some time. On the other side of the bell curve are the nice people. In the first standard deviation, they're going to stop on their way out and say thank you. They're going to include your name on a customer review sheet, the whole deal. This is that second. And then on the far side is, Lynn, do you need something? Nope. So on the far side then are the customers who just loved it so much, they're going to send a gift. They're going to send a box of chocolates to the entire staff. But think about your customers in that bell curve and know that those that are on the far ends of that bell curve are people that can be either won back or people that are willing to go on Google and write you a review and do those sorts of things. And you want to find those folks. I'm going to stop now because I know we only have 7 minutes left. And I'm going to open it up to Q&A. I assume there might be a few questions or thoughts, or maybe of your own observations. It doesn't have to be a question for me. If you have something that you want to add, who's first? Raise your hand. And Eric, are you able to mute people when they raise their hand?
I am. I think everybody's muted right now, so you'll have to unmute yourself.
Yeah. Question?
Here's my question for all of you, and raise your hand to this. If I understand what this class is, how many of you plan to go into the industry of travel, hospitality, hotels, tourism, that kind of thing? Raise your hand. Okay, thank you. How many of you plan to go into the field of restaurant management, ownership, hospitality? Raise your hand. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, I mean, some of it overlaps a little bit. Okay, good. And how many of you have worked in either a hotel or a restaurant at this point in your life? Yeah, mine was A&W. Camille, what restaurant did you work in?
I worked in Mountain View Restaurant. It's in a small town. And then I went to food and beverage at Elitch Gardens.
Awesome. So that's not Mountain View, California. That's Mountain View, Colorado.
Yeah, that's right.
Maybe just a little difference between those two.
Yeah.
Nick, what did you say you worked in a restaurant or hospitality?
Yeah, I've worked in restaurants for a while. I'm currently at the Wolf's Tailor. It's a restaurant kind of here in Denver.
And what do you do there?
One of the suburbs. I'm the maitre d'.
All right, and so I've only worked in A&W, so that's the extent of my experience working in restaurants. Actually, no, I worked in Yenching Chinese restaurant when I was in high school. I forgot that. What would be your observation on my bell curve analogy for customers?
I mean, majority of so I guess for context, we're a Michelin-starred tasting menu restaurant. And so, wow. I mean, majority of the guests that are coming in and joining us are expecting that. So I feel like that impacts it quite a bit.
Does that make it easier or harder that people are going to pay $300 to $500 for a meal potentially, and so they, I assume, have very high expectations? At least I do when I dine at a Michelin restaurant.
Yeah, 100%. I feel like it's a balance of both. I mean, you have some people who are, it's beneficial because they potentially tend to look at your services and your food and everything as this high quality thing because of the price. But then there's also, on the flip side, people who are looking at it and critiquing it much more because it is a higher price point. It's also really weird hearing my voice after I'm saying things, and it's throwing me off so much.
Yeah, it's sometimes tough to do this in a group setting where it's being broadcast. So I get that. All right, we've got about 3 minutes left. Ryan, what about you?
I worked in Ziggy's Coffee and Buffalo Wild Wings for like restaurant type stuff. And definitely when I worked at Buffalo Wild Wings, a lot of people are angry, but you just have to find ways to make them feel heard and make sure that you deliver what you're supposed to. But it's definitely hard or even like working at Ziggy's, people are usually in a rush. So they want you to do things super fast, exactly how they want it, and sometimes that just can't happen.
Yeah. Yeah. So is that bell curve fairly accurate, do you think?
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah.
Yeah,
All
I think
right.
so. There's some students that they have a class right after this. So thank you so much, Steve. I think it was a great. This was our first experience in the virtual reality environment. I think it went well. So students, they will write some reflections. I can share with you as well. But I think in general, it was great. I mean, it's a learning process for everyone now.
Exactly. I appreciate you all being pioneers in this area. See you again.
Thank you
so much.
Steve.
Thank you,
Appreciate
Steve.
it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thanks. Please come and visit us at MSU Denver.
Yes, indeed.
Okay, thank
guys
you,
wrap it
Eric.
up? Okay,
Yeah,
you're welcome.
we are done. Thank you
All
so
right.
much,
Have a
Eric.
good-
So you recorded the session as well.
I did.
Oh
yeah.
God, a T-Rex.
Yeah, I'm gonna share it with the class with those that couldn't join.
Okay, awesome. All right, have a good afternoon.